The most dangerous lie is the one that sounds completely certain. Marcus Reynolds stood quietly in the kitchen, wrapping both hands around a warm coffee mug while the first light of morning filtered through the wide windows of the house he had called home for almost 15 years. The silence between him and Danielle had been growing for months, filling every hallway more completely than furniture ever could. Their family photographs still lined the walls. The oak dining table still held the small scratch from the day they had assembled it together. The blue ceramic bowl Danielle had bought from a neighborhood art fair still rested on the kitchen island exactly where she had always kept it. Nothing inside the house suggested that everything was about to change. Marcus looked through the backyard window as a gentle breeze moved the branches of the old maple tree. He remembered planting that tree with Danielle during their first summer in the house. She had laughed because neither of them knew how deep the hole needed to be. They had spent the afternoon covered in dirt, convinced they would grow old together beneath its shade. The memory felt distant now, like a photograph fading 1 year at a time. Footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor behind him. Danielle entered the kitchen carrying a folder and her phone. She did not smile. She placed both items on the counter with careful precision before folding her arms across her chest. "We cannot keep pretending this is working," she said calmly. Marcus turned toward her without raising his voice. "I know." Danielle took a slow breath. "I have already made my decision." Marcus nodded once. "I figured you had." The quiet answer seemed to frustrate her more than an argument would have. She expected resistance. She expected questions. Instead, she found the same calm expression he always carried when life became difficult. She walked toward the living room and looked around as though examining every corner for the last time. "I talked to my sister yesterday," she said. "She agrees this is the right thing." Marcus remained near the kitchen doorway. "I hope she gives you good advice." Danielle looked back at him with growing impatience. "Marcus, you still do not understand." She pointed toward the staircase, then toward the family room, and finally toward the front hallway. "This house is mine now. You need to start thinking about where you are going to live." Her words settled into the quiet room. Marcus did not interrupt her. He simply looked around the house one more time before meeting her eyes again. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. Danielle answered without hesitation. "Absolutely." Marcus lowered his coffee mug onto the counter and rested one hand beside it. "Then I think you are forgetting one important thing." Danielle let out a short laugh. "There is nothing left to forget." She picked up her phone and began typing a message. "My parents are coming over after lunch. My brother will help me change the locks this afternoon." Marcus watched her for several seconds before slipping his phone from his pocket. He read a message that had arrived only moments earlier, locked the screen again, and quietly placed the phone back into his jacket. Danielle noticed the movement but dismissed it without another thought. She believed the conversation had ended because she believed every important decision had already been made. Marcus looked toward the front door as though measuring the passing hours instead of the distance across the room. "Before anyone changes the locks," he said calmly, "please wait until this afternoon." Danielle shook her head with complete confidence. "Nothing is going to change between now and then." Marcus offered a small, almost sympathetic smile. "That is exactly what worries me." By noon, the quiet house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a courtroom where every opinion had already been decided before anyone heard the full story. Marcus Reynolds stood in the garage, carefully placing a few personal items into a small cardboard box. A framed photograph of his late father rested beside an old baseball glove and a leather notebook that had traveled with him through nearly every stage of his adult life. He closed the box without rushing, carried it into the hallway, and set it neatly beside the staircase. Danielle noticed him as she walked past with her phone pressed against her ear. "Yes," she said confidently. "Everything will be finished today. He understands there is no point arguing anymore." She ended the call and slipped her phone into her pocket. "My parents are about 15 minutes away," she said. Marcus simply nodded. "I hope they drive safely." Danielle frowned at his calm response. She had expected frustration, disappointment, perhaps even anger. Instead, Marcus continued moving through the house with the same quiet patience that had unsettled her all morning. A few minutes later, the front doorbell rang. Danielle opened the door with a welcoming smile. Her parents stepped inside, carrying bakery boxes and grocery bags as though they were arriving for a family gathering instead of the final afternoon of a marriage. Her younger brother, Andre, followed behind them holding a toolbox over one shoulder. He lifted it slightly with a grin. I figured we might as well change the locks before dinner. Danielle smiled in agreement. That is exactly what I was thinking. Marcus greeted each of them politely. Good afternoon. Danielle's mother offered only a brief nod before setting the bakery boxes on the kitchen counter. Marcus, she said carefully. We all want to keep today peaceful. Marcus answered softly. So do I. Andre looked around the living room before glancing toward the cardboard box near the stairs. Looks like you already started packing. Marcus looked at the box. Only a few personal things. Andre folded his arms. That is probably for the best. Danielle walked toward the front windows and pulled the curtains slightly open. A white service van slowly passed the house before continuing down the street. She smiled with satisfaction. The locksmith should be here soon. Marcus looked toward the driveway, but said nothing. Danielle's father stepped closer to Marcus with a measured expression. Son, sometimes it is easier to let things go than to make everything harder. Marcus met his eyes respectfully. I agree. The older man seemed surprised by the answer. Then I hope today ends without any unnecessary problems. Marcus gave a small nod. I hope so too. Danielle picked up a folder from the dining table and tapped it lightly against her hand. Everything is already clear. The house stays with me. We should not waste any more time pretending otherwise. Marcus looked at the folder but made no effort to examine it. You believe everything is clear, he replied. Danielle sighed impatiently. Why do you keep saying things like that? Marcus glanced at the clock hanging above the fireplace. Because time matters today. Andre laughed quietly. You keep talking like someone is coming to save you. Marcus looked toward the front door. No one is coming to save me. He paused just long enough for every person in the room to look at him. Someone is coming to explain the truth. Danielle shook her head with complete confidence. You are still hoping for a miracle. Marcus offered the same calm smile he had worn since sunrise. Not a miracle. Before anyone could answer, a dark sedan with the name Foster Legal Group printed across the driver's door slowly turned into the driveway and came to a smooth stop directly in front of the house. Every confident person believes the truth is already on their side until the moment the evidence walks through the front door. The conversation stopped almost instantly as the dark sedan came to a gentle stop in the driveway. Danielle looked through the front window with a puzzled expression before glancing back at Marcus. Who is that? She asked. Marcus did not answer immediately. He simply looked toward the entrance as though he had been expecting this exact moment all day. A few seconds later, the front doorbell rang. Danielle's father stepped forward. I will get it. He opened the door to find a man in his late 50s wearing a navy suit and carrying a polished leather briefcase. His posture was calm and professional. Good afternoon, the visitor said. My name is Benjamin Foster. I am an attorney with Foster Legal Group. I have an appointment with Mr. Marcus Reynolds. Marcus walked toward the doorway. Thank you for coming, Mr. Foster. Benjamin offered a courteous handshake before stepping inside. Danielle crossed her arms. I do not understand. Why is an attorney here? Benjamin acknowledged her with a polite nod. Good afternoon, ma'am. I am here to deliver and review several legal documents concerning this property. Everyone who has a direct interest should be present. Danielle exchanged a quick glance with her parents before letting out a quiet laugh. Well, that should not take long. Andre leaned against the wall with an amused smile. Maybe this is just paperwork to help Marcus move out. Benjamin made no comment. He carefully removed his coat, accepted Marcus's invitation into the living room, and placed his leather briefcase on the coffee table. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Danielle remained standing while her parents took seats on the sofa. Andre rested against the fireplace, still wearing the confident expression he had carried all afternoon. Marcus sat in the armchair nearest the window with both hands resting comfortably on his knees. Benjamin remained standing for a moment before opening his briefcase with deliberate care. The soft click of the metal latches echoed through the otherwise silent room. He removed a thick sealed file, followed by a smaller envelope, arranging both neatly on the table without revealing their contents. Danielle smiled impatiently. If this is about the divorce paperwork, my attorney already explained everything. Benjamin looked at her professionally. This meeting is not intended to repeat information you already have. It is intended to clarify information that may not have been fully understood. Danielle frowned slightly. There is nothing unclear about ownership. Benjamin neither agreed nor disagreed. Instead, He reached into the briefcase once more and placed a slim folder beside the sealed file. Marcus watched quietly without interrupting. Danielle noticed his composure and became increasingly uncomfortable. "You seem very relaxed," she said. Marcus answered with the same steady tone he had used throughout the day. "I told you this morning that one important thing had not happened yet." Danielle folded her arms tighter. "You are making this sound much more dramatic than it really is." Benjamin looked around the room to ensure everyone was paying attention. "Before I open these documents, I need to confirm that everyone understands this meeting concerns legal records that may affect assumptions made about this residence." Danielle's father nodded cautiously. Andre shrugged. "Go ahead. We already know how this ends." Benjamin rested one hand gently on the sealed file and looked directly at Danielle. "Sometimes the documents agree with expectations," he said calmly. "Sometimes they do not." He slid one finger beneath the seal, but paused before opening it. "Before we continue, I need everyone in this room to understand that what is written here has legal standing, regardless of what anyone has believed until today." Benjamin Foster carefully broke the seal on the large envelope and removed several neatly organized documents, placing them on the coffee table one page at a time. No one spoke. Even Andre stopped leaning casually against the fireplace and shifted his attention toward the stack of papers. Benjamin adjusted his glasses before looking around the room. "Before I review these records," he said calmly, "I want everyone to understand that my responsibility is not to support either party. My responsibility is to explain the legal documents exactly as they exist." Danielle folded her arms. "That is fine. I already know what they say." Benjamin gave a polite nod. "Perhaps you do. Perhaps there are details that deserve another look." He picked up the first document and laid it flat on the table. "This property was originally purchased 14 years and 8 months ago." Danielle immediately answered, "Yes. We both lived here after we got married." Benjamin acknowledged her statement. "That is correct." Danielle smiled slightly, believing his words confirmed her position. Benjamin continued without changing his measured tone. "However, residency and legal ownership are not always identical concepts." The smile slowly faded from Danielle's face. Marcus remained completely still, his attention fixed on Benjamin rather than on anyone else's reaction. Danielle's father leaned forward. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Benjamin turned the first page so everyone could see the heading. "This is the original closing record filed with the county recorder's office." He pointed to several highlighted sections without pushing the document toward anyone. "It identifies the purchase date, financing information, and ownership registration at the time of closing." Andre shrugged. "That seems straightforward enough." Benjamin nodded. "It usually is." Danielle reached toward the table. "May I see it?" Benjamin slid the document closer. She scanned the first page quickly before looking back at him. "This does not change anything." Benjamin waited patiently. "Please continue reading." Danielle's eyes moved lower across the page. Her confident expression remained, but she slowed noticeably as she reached the final section. Marcus quietly observed every movement without speaking. Danielle finally placed the paper back onto the table. "This is only the original purchase record," she said. "A lot has happened since then." Benjamin replied, "That is an accurate observation." He reached for the second document, which is exactly why there are additional records. Danielle's mother looked from one person to another. "Is there some mistake in the paperwork?" Benjamin answered gently, "I have found no indication of a clerical mistake." He opened the second folder and removed another certified document bearing several official stamps. The room grew even quieter. Outside, the sound of a lawn mower drifted faintly through the neighborhood, making the silence inside feel even heavier. Benjamin placed the new document beside the first one with careful precision. This filing occurred several years after the original purchase. Danielle frowned. "I have never seen that document before." Benjamin looked directly at her. "That may be true." Danielle's father adjusted his glasses. "Can we read it?" "In just a moment," Benjamin replied. He picked up a third sheet from the folder. Legal records often make more sense when they are reviewed in chronological order. Danielle let out a slow breath and looked toward Marcus. "Did you know about all of this?" Marcus answered honestly. "Yes." "And you never told me?" she asked, unable to hide the confusion in her voice. Marcus held her gaze without anger. There was never a reason to argue about documents before someone was willing to read them. Benjamin carefully aligned all 3 pages into a single stack before resting his hand on the final certified record. The first document explains how the property entered public record, he said. The second explains an important legal change. The third explains why that change became effective. He looked around the room one more time before slowly lifting the final page from the table. Everything becomes much clearer after this one. Benjamin lifted the final certified record and placed it carefully beside the other documents, making sure every page remained visible. He waited several seconds before speaking, allowing everyone in the room to study the official seals and signatures for themselves. This filing, he said in an even voice, was recorded 6 years after the original purchase and was accepted by the county without objection. It is still active today. Danielle leaned forward and reached for the document. Her confidence had not disappeared completely, but it no longer carried the certainty she had displayed throughout the morning. She slowly read the first page, then the second, before stopping near the bottom of the final sheet. Her eyebrows drew together. "This cannot be right," she whispered. Benjamin remained composed. "Which part concerns you?" Danielle pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. "It says there was a transfer of ownership interest." Benjamin nodded. "That is correct." She immediately looked at Marcus. "Why would there be a transfer?" Marcus answered quietly. "Because circumstances changed." Danielle shook her head. "No one ever told me about this." Benjamin spoke before Marcus could continue. "The public record does not require every interested person to receive a personal explanation. It requires the proper legal procedures to be followed, and according to the file, they were." Danielle's father adjusted his glasses and extended his hand toward the document. Benjamin handed it to him without hesitation. The older man read much more slowly than Danielle had. His expression gradually changed from curiosity to uncertainty. After nearly a minute, he looked toward his daughter. "Danielle, this document is genuine." She immediately replied. "There has to be another page." Benjamin calmly reached into the folder. "There is." He removed a certified attachment and placed it beside the transfer record. This attachment explains why the transfer became effective. Andre stepped away from the fireplace for the first time and moved closer to the coffee table. "Can I see that?" Benjamin handed him the attachment. Andre scanned the page quickly before slowing down, then reading it a second time. His confident smile disappeared. "Wait a minute," he said quietly. "This references another agreement." Benjamin nodded once. "Exactly." Danielle looked back and forth between the papers. "What agreement?" Benjamin reached into his briefcase one more time and carefully removed a smaller sealed envelope. Unlike the previous documents, this envelope bore the signature of a notary and several certification stamps. He placed it on the table but did not open it immediately. Instead, he folded his hands and looked around the room. "Everything we have reviewed so far establishes the legal timeline," he explained. However, none of these records fully explain the reason behind that timeline. Danielle's mother broke the silence. "Then what does?" Benjamin rested one hand gently on the unopened envelope. "This document." Danielle stared at it as though seeing it for the first time. "What is inside?" Benjamin answered without hesitation. "A legally executed agreement that connects every document we have reviewed this afternoon." Marcus remained silent, offering neither satisfaction nor relief. He simply watched as everyone else struggled to understand how their assumptions had begun to unravel. Danielle looked directly at him. "You knew this agreement existed all along." Marcus nodded once. "Yes." "Why did you never show it to me?" she asked. Marcus spoke with the same calm voice that had never risen above an ordinary conversation. "Because I believed the right time to discuss legal documents was when everyone involved was willing to examine every page instead of only the pages they expected to see." Benjamin picked up the sealed envelope with both hands and slowly broke the certification seal. He carefully unfolded the first page, glanced at the heading to confirm its identity, and then looked around the room once more. "The next document answers every remaining question," he said. "It also changes the meaning of everything that has been said inside this house today." Benjamin unfolded the final agreement with deliberate care and laid every page flat across the coffee table so that no one could mistake what they were about to read. He adjusted the papers into perfect alignment before speaking. "This document was signed, witnessed, notarized, and officially recorded on the same date referenced in the transfer record we have already reviewed. Danielle stared at the pages without reaching for them. Her earlier confidence had given way to uncertainty, and for the first time that afternoon she seemed afraid of what the next sentence might reveal. Benjamin continued in the same measured voice. This agreement was prepared after a financial restructuring involving the property. It established how ownership would be protected in the future and under what conditions that ownership could change. Danielle's father leaned forward. Protected for whom? Benjamin looked down at the signature page before answering. For Mr. Marcus Reynolds. The room fell completely silent. Andre looked from Benjamin to Marcus, expecting someone to interrupt and declare there had been a mistake. No one did. Danielle slowly reached for the agreement with both hands and began reading each paragraph far more carefully than she had read the earlier documents. Every few lines she stopped, returned to the previous sentence, and read it again. Benjamin waited patiently without saying another word. After nearly a full minute, Danielle looked up. This says the transfer was made to secure the property after the refinancing. Benjamin nodded once. Correct. She continued reading. It also says the ownership interest became exclusively his after all required filings were completed. Correct, Benjamin repeated. Danielle looked stunned. I never signed anything that gave away this house. Benjamin calmly turned another page toward her. The agreement does not state that you transferred the property. It states that the property was restructured under terms accepted during the refinancing process, supported by the recorded filings and accompanying disclosures. Those records have remained valid without legal challenge. Danielle's mother covered her mouth with one hand. Danielle's father lowered his eyes toward the papers and quietly shook his head. Andre read the signature page himself before asking, So everything we believe today was based on an assumption? Benjamin answered without hesitation. That would be an accurate description. Danielle looked directly at Marcus. You knew every word in this agreement. Marcus answered honestly. I reviewed it with Benjamin years ago. Then why did you never bring it up? She asked, her voice no longer carrying anger but confusion. Marcus rested his hands together and spoke quietly. Because I never wanted our marriage to become an argument over paperwork. I believe trust mattered more than legal documents. I hoped we would never need to open that file. Danielle lowered her eyes to the agreement again. The certainty that had filled the house that morning was disappearing one page at a time. Benjamin carefully gathered the supporting exhibits attached to the agreement and placed them beside the main document. These exhibits include the recorded filings, lender acknowledgments, county certifications, and confirmation that every required procedure was completed according to applicable law. Danielle slowly turned through each attachment. Every official seal matched the previous documents. Every date aligned with the legal timeline Benjamin had already explained. Nothing contradicted the record. Danielle's father finally broke the silence. Benjamin, are you telling us there is no dispute over legal ownership? Benjamin met his eyes calmly. Based on the certified records before us, the ownership status is clearly established. No one spoke after that. The quiet became heavier than any argument could have been. Danielle remained seated with the agreement resting in her lap, while Marcus watched her with neither satisfaction nor resentment. Benjamin then reached back into his briefcase one final time and removed a single folded document that had not yet been discussed. He placed it gently beside the agreement and said, There is only one remaining record, and it explains why Mr. Reynolds asked everyone to wait until this afternoon before making any decisions. Benjamin placed the final folded document on top of the other records and waited until every pair of eyes in the room settled on it. Unlike the previous papers, this one consisted of only a few pages, yet the weight of the moment seemed heavier than anything they had reviewed so far. Danielle looked exhausted. The confidence that had filled her voice earlier that day had disappeared, replaced by uncertainty she could no longer hide. Benjamin unfolded the document and spoke carefully. This is not another ownership record. Ownership has already been established by the certified filings we reviewed. This document concerns the legal effect of those records on the current situation. Danielle swallowed quietly. What does that mean? Benjamin slid the document toward the center of the table. It means the legal rights associated with this residence have already been determined, and this document explains the responsibilities that follow. Danielle's father accepted the pages first. He read silently for several moments before lowering them into his lap. His shoulders seemed to sink. "I did not know," he admitted softly. Danielle looked at him with surprise. "Dad." He slowly handed the document to her without answering. Danielle began reading, moving through each paragraph much more slowly than before. Halfway down the second page, she stopped. She returned to the previous paragraph and read it again. Then she looked toward Benjamin. "This says I cannot require Marcus to leave this property because I do not have the legal authority to do so." Benjamin nodded once. That statement accurately reflects the recorded documents and the applicable agreement. The room became completely still. Andre looked at Marcus with an expression that was no longer confident. "So when we talked about changing the locks," Benjamin answered before Marcus needed to respond. "Doing so would have created legal complications because Mr. Reynolds possesses the legal ownership rights established in the county records." Andre slowly lowered his eyes. The toolbox he had carried into the house now seemed completely out of place beside the front door. Danielle continued reading until she reached the final page. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the document onto the coffee table. She looked across the room at Marcus for a long moment before speaking. "You knew this would happen today." Marcus answered honestly. "I knew the documents would speak for themselves." "You could have shown them to me months ago," Danielle whispered. Marcus nodded. "I could have." She searched his face for anger, satisfaction, or revenge. She found none. "Then why did you wait?" Marcus looked briefly toward the old maple tree outside the living room window before answering. "Because I wanted us to solve our problems as husband and wife, not as two people hiding behind paperwork. I believed we still had a chance to talk to each other instead of through legal documents. This morning, when you told me the house was yours and asked me to leave, I realized the truth would no longer be accepted unless someone else presented it." No one interrupted him. Even the quiet sounds from outside seemed to disappear. Danielle's mother slowly wiped away a tear before placing one hand over her daughter's. Danielle did not pull away. She simply stared at the agreement and the final legal notice lying side by side on the table. Every assumption she had made that morning had been replaced by facts she could no longer deny. Benjamin carefully gathered the certified records into neat stacks, but left the final document in front of Danielle. "These papers are not intended to humiliate anyone," he said calmly. "Their purpose is simply to establish the legal truth." Danielle closed her eyes for a brief moment before opening them again. When she finally looked back at Marcus, there was no certainty left in her expression, only the painful realization that she had spent the entire day asking the rightful owner to leave his own home. No one moved for what felt like an entire minute. The documents remained spread across the coffee table, but they no longer seemed like ordinary pieces of paper. They had stripped away every assumption that had filled the house only a few hours earlier. Benjamin quietly organized the certified copies into a single folder before closing his briefcase halfway, leaving it open only in case another question needed to be answered. Danielle remained seated, her hands resting on the final document without actually touching it. She looked around the living room as though she were seeing it for the first time. Every family photograph, every piece of furniture, every memory attached to the house suddenly carried a different meaning. Her mother finally broke the silence. "Marcus," she said softly, "I owe you an apology." Marcus looked toward her with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the afternoon. "You do not owe me anything." She slowly shook her head. "Yes, I do. I came into this house believing only one version of the story. I never asked you for yours." Marcus gave a respectful nod, but did not speak. Danielle's father stood up and walked a few steps toward him. "I should have listened before making assumptions," he admitted. "Instead, I treated you as though everything had already been decided." Marcus rose from his chair and offered him a handshake. "Thank you for saying that." The older man accepted it firmly. "You handled today with far more patience than most people would have." Andre looked down at the unopened toolbox resting beside the front door. He walked over, picked it up, and carried it back into the hallway. When he returned, he stopped a few feet from Marcus. "I came here ready to change the locks," he admitted with an embarrassed smile. "Now I wish I had left that toolbox at home." Marcus let out the smallest smile of the day. "I appreciate your honesty." Andre nodded once. "I judged you without knowing the facts. I was wrong." Benjamin quietly observed the exchange without interrupting. He had seen many legal disputes over the years, but very few ended with people choosing honesty over pride. Danielle slowly stood and looked directly at Marcus. Her voice was almost unrecognizable compared to the confidence she had shown that morning. I spent the entire day telling you to leave a house that legally belongs to you. Marcus did not answer immediately. He simply waited. Danielle lowered her eyes. I believed I was protecting myself. Instead, I stopped listening to the person I promised to trust. She took a slow breath before continuing. I should have asked questions instead of making declarations. Marcus remained calm. That would have changed today. Danielle nodded. I know. She looked toward the family photographs lining the wall. Somewhere along the way, I stopped believing we were solving problems together. I started believing I had to win. Marcus walked toward the fireplace and gently picked up one of the framed photographs taken during their first summer in the house. The picture showed both of them smiling beside the young maple tree they had planted together years earlier. He looked at the photograph for a moment before placing it back exactly where it had been. Winning was never the goal, he said quietly. Keeping our respect for each other should have been. Danielle wiped away a tear and looked at him with genuine regret. I am sorry, Marcus. Not because of the documents. Because I stopped trusting you long before I stopped reading those papers. Benjamin quietly closed his briefcase and stood. My work here is finished, he said politely. The legal questions have been answered. What happens next is no longer a legal decision. As he walked toward the front door, every person in the room understood that the certified records had settled the ownership of the house, but only Marcus and Danielle could decide whether honesty and humility would be enough to rebuild what had been quietly breaking long before any lawyer arrived. Benjamin offered one final handshake before leaving through the front door, and the quiet sound of the latch closing behind him seemed to mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. No one hurried to speak. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the hardwood floor, illuminating the same living room where certainty had slowly given way to truth. Danielle's parents quietly gathered the bakery boxes they had brought earlier, but neither of them seemed interested in taking them home. They exchanged a brief look before Danielle's father turned toward Marcus one last time. Thank you for showing more grace than we deserve today, he said sincerely. Marcus nodded respectfully. I appreciate you saying that. Her parents quietly left the house, followed by Andre, who paused at the front door before looking back. I hope someday you can forgive how quickly I judged you. Marcus answered with a calm smile. People make better decisions after they know the whole story. That is enough for me. Andre nodded gratefully and stepped outside. As the front door closed again, the house became silent. Only Marcus and Danielle remained. For several moments, neither of them moved. Danielle slowly collected the legal papers into a neat stack before placing them beside the family photographs on the coffee table. She looked around the room that had witnessed so many birthdays, holidays, and ordinary evenings together. I kept saying this was my house, she said quietly. I forgot it was supposed to be our home. Marcus remained standing near the window where he had spent so much of the day watching the maple tree sway in the afternoon breeze. A house is protected by legal documents, he replied. A home is protected by trust. We lost the second one long before anyone questioned the first. Danielle lowered her head. I know. She walked toward the kitchen island and rested one hand on the blue ceramic bowl they had bought together years before. When did we stop talking to each other? She asked softly. Marcus thought for a moment before answering. Probably little by little. No single conversation caused it. We simply allowed assumptions to replace honest discussions. Danielle nodded slowly. And I let pride convince me that certainty was the same thing as truth. Marcus walked into the kitchen and stood across from her. Today was never about proving that I owned this house. If that had been my goal, I could have shown you the documents years ago. Danielle looked up. Then why did you ask Benjamin to come today? Marcus answered honestly. Because once you decided I no longer belonged here, I realized my words would never change your mind. Only the facts could. Danielle took a deep breath. I cannot change what I said this morning. No, Marcus replied gently. But every day after today is still waiting for a decision. She looked at him with hopeful uncertainty. Do you want me to leave? Marcus shook his head without hesitation. If I wanted revenge, I would have asked that question hours ago. I do not want revenge. I want honesty. I want respect. I want us to stop treating each other like opponents. Tears filled Danielle's eyes once more. I cannot promise that everything will be easy. Marcus smiled warmly for the first time that day. Neither can I. But easy has never been the foundation of a lasting marriage. Choosing each other every day is. Danielle stepped closer and quietly reached for his hand. This time Marcus did not hesitate. Outside, the maple tree they had planted together years earlier continued to stand firmly in the yard, its roots strengthened through every changing season. Marcus looked through the window before turning back toward Danielle with quiet confidence. The legal papers had settled the question of ownership, but forgiveness remained a choice that no document could ever require. As the evening light filled the house, both of them finally understood that the greatest victory was never about who possessed the deed. It was about rediscovering the humility, trust, and respect that could turn a house into a home once again.